Okay, so this is chapter 2 of book 3. So we're going to continue on with our considerations. Like I said, not easy, and I'm offering things that might be, well, just realize it's more complicated, and it'd be worthy for you to go back and read this yourself if you'd like to, because I'm leaving things out, and but really what I'm trying to do is to make it understandable. So that requires me to simplify some things. But once again, ask your questions and think about it, and we can get into the weeds a little bit more. Okay. All right. So chapter 2. Now that we've talked about voluntary and involuntary actions, we now can start to think about choices. Okay. He says it like this: both the voluntary and the involuntary having been delimited or delineated, we must next discuss choice. For it is thought to be the most closely bound up with virtue and to discriminate characters better than actions do. Okay, this is really interesting. A lot of you have been concerned that Aristotle does not include anything about intentions, and we all think intentions really matter and why we're doing things and our motivations. This is very close to what Aristotle means by choice, and he thinks that the intentions and the reasons for our actions are more important than the actions themselves, because the intentions and the purposes help us understand the character of the person much better than what they do. That just seems right. You can think about this in a couple different ways. Three people could do the right thing, so to speak, namely helping Granny across the street, as we said earlier, but they all could have very different reasons and intentions. Okay. One person could be doing that because they want money from Granny. One person could be doing that because they want to hurry up and see the fast car that's going to go by. And the third person could be doing it because they genuinely enjoy being a good person. Once again, the reasons for action, the intentions, help delineate the person better than the actions themselves. Okay, that's a pretty, I think, clear example. Once again, if you want to push back on that, feel free to think about it. Okay, so he continues and says, choice then seems to be voluntary, okay, but not the same thing as the voluntary. The latter extends more widely. For both children and the lower animals share in voluntary action, but not in choice. And acts done on the spur of the moment we describe as voluntary, but not as chosen. Here it's really important because does a couple things for Aristotle. One, it reveals that he thinks that choice requires deliberation, like thinking and processing, and then acting. And whereas little children, animals can act, they can just do actions of their own will, but not this type of higher level ordered thinking and intentions. So if we want to simplify it, we can say humans act for reasons, whereas animals and little children just act on the basis of impulses. Okay. Or to make this another way to understand it, persons or mature adults act on the basis of reasons, whereas children and possibly some animals worked on the basis of desires simply. Okay, they just what they want, not what they think is actually good. Okay, or for them, they just boil down to the same thing. But human agents, once again, seem to be something different. And Aristotle thinks that we only really praise someone for choice. And this will also be very important for Aristotle because he thinks choice is required for virtue. And without the choice element, we can't really praise someone or not. Once again, some very interesting questions here, but let's continue. He says, first, let's think about what choice is not. And he says choice is this sentence here: those who think choice is appetite or anger or wish or a kind of opinion do not seem to be right. So he thinks that choice is something different from those four things. It's not appetite, because that would basically just be the same as animals. It's not the same thing as anger. It's not what we wish. It's not even a kind of opinion. It's something different. Once again, you can go back and read that in book chapter 2. I think it'd be worth your time, but we're trying to move it along here. So he says, okay, what is it? He says, what then, or what kind of thing is it? Choice. since it is none of the things we have mentioned, appetite, desire, opinion. It seems to be voluntary, right? It seems to be done internal to the person, but not all involuntary to be an object of choice. He says, is it then what has been decided on by previous deliberation? Okay, that's basically going to be his answer. He says choice involves this deliberative process, and then we choose, which will take us into chapter 3. But he says, at any rate, choice involves a rational principle and thought. Hence, again, why children and animals can't have choice, because he thinks that choice involves a rational principle and thought, or reasoning capacities. Even the name seems to suggest that it is what is chosen before other things. So once again, he thinks choice begins at a previous process where the person's reasoning about the end that they want, and then they choose a set of actions to get there. That seems to require higher levels of thinking, and goes beyond just what do I desire, what do I want at a simple level, but how do I get there? How do I reason in a manner that is linear to get to what I want? Okay, and that is chapter 2, which moves us right into chapter 3. Okay, so deliberation, right? He's already indicated that deliberation seems to be what's required for choice. So now we're left with, okay, what's deliberation and when do we do it? And so he says this word, he says, do we deliberate about everything, and is everything a possible subject of deliberation? Or is deliberation impossible about some things? We ought presumably to call not what a fool or a madman would deliberate about, but what a sensible man would deliberate about, a subject of deliberation. So to start his inquiry, he says, look, we care about what sensible men do when they deliberate, not crazy people, okay? Crazy people are not always the best guide for what actually is rational and normative, or what we ought to do, okay? So he says, okay, focusing just on the rational man, he says, okay, now about eternal things no one deliberates. For example, about the material universe, or the incommensurability of the diagonal in the side of a square. But no more do we deliberate about things that involve movement, but always happen in the same way, whether of necessity or by nature, or from any other cause. Just hang with me here. For example, the solstices and the rising of the stars, nor about things that happen now in one way, now in another. For example, droughts and rains, nor about chance events like the finding of treasure. But we do not deliberate even about all human affairs. For instance, no Spartan deliberates about the best constitution for the Scythians, for none of these things can be brought about by our own efforts. Okay, that sentence is really important, that last one. We deliberate about things that are in our power and can be done, and these are in fact what is left. So what he's saying is deliberation deals with things that are actually in our ability, the means at our disposal. We don't deliberate in terms of moral action about whether the moon is made of cheese, or whether or not I can give myself $1 million. Those things would not be objects of deliberation because I don't have those within my abilities. If I was a millionaire, my deliberation would change because I would have more options to myself. But every single person deliberates about what is in their power. Okay, what are they able to do? What are they able to bring about by their own efforts? Okay, we deliberate about things in our power. Now, later on, he will talk about a form of deliberation that deals with more theoretical activity. But we're going to get to that maybe when we think about book 6, because we do think about deliberation in that way. But at least in regards to moral deliberation, we do not seem to just, at least the way that he's talking about it, when we are considering what we ought to do, we don't consider these impossible things. And because that's what crazy people seem to do, right? Crazy people seem to genuinely deliberate in terms of whether or not they should give money to a person, whether or not the moon is made of cheese, right? And the issue with that is that it doesn't seem to actually be involved in their power. They don't understand themselves properly, yada, yada, yada. You may kind of be getting confused here, and I think understandably it's not that clear, but just understand it as we deliberate about the things that are within our possible actions, what we can actually do. And then from that understanding of what actually we're capable of, we then deliberate about how to do something. Okay, so let's continue on. He says, we deliberate not about ends, but about means. For a doctor does not deliberate about whether he should heal, nor an orator about whether he shall persuade, nor a statesman whether he'll produce law and order, nor does anyone else deliberate about his end. They assume the end and consider how and by what means it is to be attained. And if it seems to be produced by several means, they consider by which it is most easily and best produced. While if it is achieved by only one, they consider how it will be achieved by this and by what means this will be achieved, till they come to the first cause, which in the order of discovery is last. So this relates very strongly to the last point. Deliberation is in regards to the ends, the means to achieve the end, okay? So we deliberate about what's in our powers or our capabilities to achieve the thing that we want and how best to get there. What's the best route to get that? That's what Aristotle means by deliberation. We deliberate about what's the best way to get or do or accomplish the end that I desire. What steps do I have to take? And then that's what deliberation is about. The end is already given there through another process. So let's say that someone wants to become healthy. Deliberation kicks in when they think about, okay, what can I do to start to become more healthy? Okay, I can start to do da-da-da-da-da-da. And then notice choice is going to kick in. But it's after the deliberative process that choice kicks in. Hence why animals or children aren't really capable of this. They're not able to just process that level of intention. Okay, that comes as our minds mature. Okay, so he continues on and says this. It seems then, as has been said, that man is a moving principle of actions. Now, deliberation is about the things to be done by the agent himself, and actions are for the sake of things other than themselves. We act for something else, okay? For the end cannot be a subject of deliberation, but only the means. Okay, he's hammering down that point. Nor indeed can the particular fact be a subject of it, as whether this bread or has been baked as it should. For these are matters of perception. If we are to be always deliberating, we shall have to go on to infinity. So there's a lot of things here. Deliberation is about the means to achieve the end. Whether something is or is not not a matter of deliberation. That's a matter of just me seeing whether it is or is not. Okay, so deliberation is wrapped up with the way that I want to accomplish the end that I think I should be striving towards, and the facts that help me determine that will usually be a result of perception. And he basically continues that last line that says, deliberation doesn't go on forever, right? So we end up coming down to a certain, okay, I need to take these actions, okay? I'm kind of zooming through here because I don't want to take forever. And you can kind of ask me more questions if you have them when we get to class. This last line about deliberation, then, he says, the same thing is deliberated upon and is chosen, except that the object of choice is already determinate, since it is that which has been decided upon as a result of deliberation that is the object of choice. So once again, deliberation gives us the route, so to speak, which enables the choice to be made. So once I have my route, I choose to do that. So notice the relationship between deliberation and choice here. Deliberation tells me the means, and then once I know the route, I then can choose that route to accomplish the end, okay? For everyone ceases to inquire how he is to act when he has brought the moving principle back to himself and to the ruling part of himself, and this is what chooses. So deliberation gives you the information, you reason it out, and then you become aware of the information, and then you recognize it's within your power, and then you realize you can act. And it's that's what you choose. You're choosing the path that you deliberated on. This is plain, he continues, also from the ancient constitution, which Homer represented, for the kings announced their choices to the people. The object of choice being one of the things in our power which is desired after deliberation. Choice will be deliberate desire of things in our own power. Okay? For when we have decided as a result of deliberation, we desire in accordance with our deliberation. So deliberation is key to achieve what we ultimately desire, the end. right? And then once we choose, it's in accordance with that deliberation. Okay. We may take it then that we have decided choice in outline and stated the nature of its objects and the fact that it is concerned with means. We choose the means for the sake of the end. Okay. All right. So let's sum this up. So this is 2 and 3. We're going to skip 4. Chapter 4 is about wish, and wish, we'll get to that in a second. Okay. So sum it up. Which actions are we responsible for? He says the voluntary actions. Some actions, voluntary actions, are pure. They're all within us. Some of them are mixed, kind of like the ship case where you're taking the grain back to your city. The storm comes in, and then you have to figure out what to do. You know, that's not purely everything inside of you, right? What you would choose and what you would want. There are external factors that you have to take into account, but we'd still want to say they're voluntary. Yeah, okay. Then he thinks there's non-voluntary actions, which are usually a result of ignorance. So we don't know what we're doing, and we wouldn't have chosen that if we didn't know we were doing. So for example, I may give a cup of water to someone without knowing that it's actually a certain poison, right? And then they die as a result of drinking it. I didn't do that willingly. I would never have killed that person, but because I did it out of ignorance, they died, right? And then we would have mercy on that person because it wasn't their intention to kill the person. It was done in ignorance. That would be done in ignorance and regretted. He also thinks there's cases where people do things ignorantly and they don't regret it. And normally that's a own separate type of action. We also have a compulsory action where someone forces us to do something, or like someone puts a chip inside my brain and makes me do something. Those are non-voluntary actions, and that kind of usually results in mercy and forgiveness, but not always. For example, he thinks that evil men do things in ignorance because they don't actually know it's good, but we still want to blame them. That'll get into chapter 5. So when you read chapter 5, you'll get into this, and it'll be some fun conversations for you. Okay. To sum it all up then, so the last slide was about which actions we're responsible for. By the way, I didn't make that graph, someone else did. Very thankful for that. So whoever did that, thank you. So this is what we're responsible for, voluntary actions. This is kind of his theory of action. So Aristotle thinks a wish or a desire gives us our end, right? So that's what gives us the end, right? We don't deliberate on that. We're just kind of given that, okay? Although you may think that we do deliberate on what ends, but that is another question we can think about. So, but let's just simplify it again. Wish gives us the end. We then deliberate about the best ways to accomplish that end. And this deals with means, right? So we deliberate about the means to achieve the end. This is where we figure out how do we best get that. Once we have properly deliberated and we figure things out, and we bring it back all the way to how do we start? Okay, so let's say that you want to become healthy, and then you start talking to people and you start reasoning. Okay, if I want to become healthy, I have to do X, Y, and Z. And then in order to start X, I have to do da 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 da. You then work all the way back to yourself and say, okay, given that I'm here, what's the first thing I got to do? Then I got to do. Then I got to do. And then that's what gives you your choice. So then you choose, and as a result of that deliberation, and your choices will align with your deliberation to achieve the end. And that's how he thinks rational actions are done. And that's why he thinks that ultimately those actions, as a result of choice, are what we praise, and also what reveals about our character. Okay, that is book 3, chapters 1 through 4, although we skipped 4, more like 1 through 3. And I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to talking to you guys about this as a result of your discussion of chapter 5. So with that being said, thank you.